Hey there fellow homebrewers, today let's make a beer. My wife and I just got back from the UK, and part of that trip we went to Ireland, where of course everyone loves their Guinness. So if you can't tell already, that's what we're doing today. Of course you already knew from the title as well, but with that being said, here's what we've got cooking. So right now we're heating up 5.2 gallons of water. This strike water is going to be heated up to 154 degrees. Our goal is to hit 150 for the mash. That lower temperature should help the yeast to consume more of the sugars in this and make it a dry stout. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of the super sweet stouts. I feel like they're like a milkshake and they sit at the bottom of your gut. Can't have one after the other either. So we're gonna stick with a dry stout for today. We've got a pretty simple water chemistry today. We're just trying to match Dublin water. I'll go ahead and post the parts per million up here once we go ahead and dump that in a second. And then besides that, our grain bill is just a few different grains. Pale 2-row, flaked barley, and some roasted barley. Now, I've read that, of course, some people put the roasted barley in towards the end of the mash. Brewlosophy has a really good article on the difference between doing at the end and doing just a full mash with these grains. And it turns out you do get a little bit of difference between the two, but you get more of a full body if you use it at the beginning of the mash. So we're just gonna go ahead and dump it all in at the beginning and see what we get. We have one hop for today that's going to be put in at the 60-minute. This is going to be Willamette. Now, normally you would use a different hop in this, be like East Kent Golding. However, in this case, I have Willamette on hand and it's considered to be a similar-ish hop. And that's going to be, like I said, just at the beginning of the boil, super simple today. Yeah, let's get into it. It's a beautiful day outside. Why not?
Once we've hit strike temperature, it's time to dump in our grains, mix it up, and set a 60-minute timer.
After 10 minutes into the mash, I took a sample of this wort circulating here, and it turns out our pH is at 6. So we need to bring it down a little bit. We want to be between 5.2 and 5.4. So I've got 3 milliliters of lactic acid. We're just going to go ahead and spray that in. And we'll measure it again here in about 10 minutes.
An optional step at the end of the 60-minute mash is to bump up the temperature to 170 degrees for 10 minutes. This simply just helps things flow a little better into the kettle. After mash out, we pull our grain basket and let things drain into the kettle and get ready to go to boil. Once we're at a boil, we set a 60-minute timer and add our one hop addition today, 1.45 ounces of Willamette. With 15 minutes left in the boil, I add a Whirlfloc tablet.
All right, our brew day has come to a close. Our boil is done. Right now, we're just gonna go ahead and let all the runnings come off from the hop container right here. And we're circulating some cold water through this right down here to chill the wort. We're getting that down to 60 degrees, between 60 and 70 degrees. From there, we're pumping some of this hot water through this hose over into the fermenter, where I have some sanitizer in there. That way we can get this thing nice and clean before fermentation needs to take place. All right, now that our wort is cooled down and in our fermenter, all we have to do is add our yeast. Today I'm using Imperial A09 Pub. This is an Irish yeast, just as you should use for a Guinness-ish beer. Go ahead and pour that on in. From there, we'll cap it, let it ferment, and I'll see you at the tasting. Fellow homebrewers, it's time to try the Guinness-ish Draught Clone beer. I gotta say, I'm actually very pleased with this. Now I say Guinness-ish, because obviously it doesn't hit it right on the head for a Guinness, but some wonderful chocolate smells off the top there. And it carries through in the taste too. Nice and dry, crisp. It's just a nice, clean tasting stout. Now, I will be doing this again, trying to get it even closer to what a Guinness tastes like. But to be honest, even if you brew this beer as is, the recipe that I have in this video, I think you'll enjoy this one. There are some notes that I want to touch on though for you. First, of course, being about the yeast. This yeast I went into not really knowing a whole lot about, but the Imperial Pub yeast is super fast acting, to the point that it was done ripping through this beer in like 2 days. That did come with its own challenges, partly on my own fault and partly due to, well, just how this yeast acts. And I say due to my own fault because I lowered the temperature on this way too low. I read the temperature range for a different yeast and thought it was this yeast, and I set it to around 61 to 62 degrees Fahrenheit. Don't do that. It is supposed to be between 64 and 70 degrees. So as long as you stay within that range, I think you'll have no problems brewing this beer. And then besides that, I did run into a stall with this beer because I had it too low in temperature. So I did have to rouse the yeast. But after that, it did just fine. It brought it all the way back down to the final gravity I was expecting. Speaking of gravity, we started out with an original gravity of 1039. If I remember correctly, this was a little lower than what we were expecting to hit, but perfectly fine in the end. It was off only by, I think, a few points. Our final gravity was 1009, so just like a dry stout, that is pretty dry. This brings us to our alcohol content of 3.9, so we'll round up, roughly 4% beer, which, if I recall correctly, the Guinness is 4.2%. So again, off by just a little bit, but not much. All that said, I think you should give it a shot if you're looking for a nice dry stout to kind of just carry you through the summer days as it's getting nicer outside. If you have any comments, leave them down below. Love to hear them, love to interact with you guys, and I hope you enjoy your summer days. Cheers!